My name's Jessica, and I grew up in this tiny house with my parents. My dad, he was always the dreamer type. He'd bought this little Italian restaurant from some old guy who was retiring. It wasn't exactly raking in the dough, but Dad loved it. He'd come home smelling like garlic and tomato sauce, a big grin on his face no matter how tough the day had been. Mom, on the other hand, she was a whole different story, a real estate agent with a sharp tongue and an even sharper temper. I remember her click-clacking around the house in her high heels, always on the phone, always making deals. She made way more money than Dad, and boy did she let him know it. Another slow day at that dump you call a restaurant, she'd sneer at him over dinner. "When are you gonna grow up and get a real job, you loser?" I'd watch Dad's face fall, but he never fought back. He'd just shrug and say, "Business'll pick up soon, honey. You'll see." But it never did, at least not back then. And Mom's anger, it didn't stop with Dad. Nope, I got my fair share too. It was like she resented me for existing, you know? Like I was just another reminder of her failed life with Dad. I remember this one time I was maybe 12, and I asked her for some money to go to the movies with my friends. You'd think I'd asked her to sell a kidney or something. Money, she practically spat the word at me. "What, you think it grows on trees? You're just as useless as your father. No wonder you two get along so well." That was pretty much how it went. Dad would try to sneak me a few bucks when he could, but mostly I learned to do without. I started helping out at the restaurant after school, washing dishes, sweeping floors, whatever needed doing. It wasn't much, but at least I felt like I was contributing something. Things came to a head when I turned 14. I came home from school one day, and the house was weirdly quiet. No Mom yelling on the phone, no clacking heels, just silence. I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table, his face in his hands. There was a piece of paper in front of him. "She's gone, Jess," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother's left us." I picked up the note. It was short, brutal. "I'm done with this pathetic excuse for a life. I've found someone who can actually provide for me. Don't try to find me. Tom, you're a loser and always will be. Jessica, you're just dead weight I never wanted. Good riddance to you both." I remember standing there reading those words over and over, trying to make them make sense. My own mother, calling me dead weight, saying she never wanted me. The next few months were a blur of courtrooms and lawyers. Dad was determined to make sure Mom couldn't just waltz back into our lives whenever she felt like it. I remember sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching Dad stand tall as he asked the judge to take away Mom's parental rights. Mom didn't even bother to show up. Guess her new life was too good to be interrupted by little things like, oh, I don't know, her own kid. When the judge announced his decision, I felt this weird mix of relief and sadness. "The court hereby terminates the parental rights of Sarah Thompson," he said, banging his gavel. Just like that, I officially became a one-parent kid. Life after that? It was tough, not gonna lie. Dad threw himself into work, spending crazy hours at the restaurant. Me? I stepped up at home. At 14, I was doing laundry, cooking meals, even helping with the bills. After school, I'd head straight to the restaurant to wipe the tables and wash the dishes. Then, about 2 years in, everything changed again. I was 16, knee-deep in homework one night when Dad burst through the door, waving a letter. "Jess, you're not gonna believe this," he shouted, his face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Turns out Dad's grandfather, my great-grandfather, had passed away. I'd never met him, but apparently he'd left Dad a whopping $400,000. Just like that, we went from scraping by to, well, not rich, but comfortable. Dad didn't waste any time. He poured that money right back into the restaurant. New equipment, fancy decor, the works. He even hired actual staff. Can you believe it? "No more dish duty for you, kiddo," he grinned, ruffling my hair. "Unless you want to, of course. Employee's choice." I chose to hang up my apron. Don't get me wrong, I loved helping Dad, but man, it felt good to just be a normal teenager for once. The restaurant took off like a rocket. Before I knew it, Dad was opening a second location, then a third. He was in all the local business magazines, this big success story. Me? I threw myself into school. For the first time, I could actually think about college without wondering how the hell we'd pay for it. We started traveling too. Nothing crazy, just weekend trips here and there. But after years of barely leaving our zip code, it felt like we were globe-trotting. You ever miss Mom? I asked Dad once, as we were driving back from a beach trip. He was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. I miss the idea of her, sometimes. The woman I thought I married. But the real Sarah? Nah. We're better off, Jess, both of us. I nodded, realizing I felt the same way. The mom-shaped hole in my life had slowly filled up with other things: school, friends, my relationship with Dad. High school graduation came and went in a blur of cap tossing and teary goodbyes. I was 18, ready to take on the world, and thanks to Dad's success, I had options. I chose to study investment analysis. Figured if I was going to help manage Dad's newfound wealth, I might as well do it right. College was. Well, college. Late nights studying, too much coffee, the occasional party. Don't tell Dad. But through it all, I kept my eye on the prize. When I walked across that stage 4 years later, diploma in hand, I felt on top of the world. But Dad? He took it to another level. I've got a surprise for you, Jess, he said after the ceremony, dangling a set of keys in front of me. I thought it was a car or something. Nope, it was a freaking apartment. Dad, you didn't, I gasped, staring at the keys. He just shrugged, that same old grin on his face. Can't have my little girl worrying about rent while she's conquering the financial world, can I? So there I was, 22 years old with a degree, a job offer, and my own place. The next decade flew by. I threw myself into my career, climbing the corporate ladder one rung at a time. Every bonus, every raise, I socked it away, invested it. Dad's voice was always in the back of my head: make your money work for you, Jess. By the time I hit 34, those investments had paid off. I'd managed to buy 2 more apartments, both bringing in a steady stream of rental income. Not too shabby for a girl who once couldn't afford movie tickets, huh? Life was good. Really good. Until it wasn't. It started with a phone call. I was at work, knee-deep in spreadsheets, when my cell buzzed. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Hey Dad, what's up? I answered, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I kept typing. Jess, his voice was quiet, serious. I need you to come over. Got some news. My stomach dropped. Dad never called during work hours unless it was an emergency. An hour later, I was sitting in his living room, trying to process the words cancer and stage 3 and treatment options. We'll fight this, I said, gripping his hand. Whatever it takes, Dad. We're a team, remember? He nodded, squeezing my hand back. That we are, kiddo. That we are. The next year was a roller coaster. Chemo, radiation, more tests than I could count. The cancer would retreat, then come roaring back. Through it all, Dad kept his spirits up. Even on his worst days, he'd crack jokes with the nurses, ask about their families. I was at the hospital every chance I got. When he was home, I'd come over after work, armed with groceries and determination. You don't have to do this, Jess, he'd say, watching me chop onions in his kitchen. I'd just shake my head. We're a team, remember? Besides, someone's got to make sure you're eating something other than hospital jello. His favorite was my onion soup. It was the one thing he could always stomach, even on his worst days. I'd sit with him, talking about everything and nothing: work, the latest movie I'd seen, funny stories from his restaurants. Anything to keep his mind off the battle his body was fighting. One night, as I was getting ready to leave, he caught my hand. Jess, he said, his voice serious, we need to talk. I sat down, my heart pounding. Dad took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. The doctors, he started, then paused, squeezing my hand. They're giving me about 6 months, Jess. The world stopped. I couldn't breathe. No, I whispered. No, Dad, they're wrong. We'll get a second opinion, He shook his head, cutting me off. I've already done all that, kiddo. It's time we face facts. I felt tears streaming down my face. Dad, my rock, my best friend, how could he be leaving me? Hey now, he said softly, wiping my cheek. None of that, we've still got time, and I intend to make the most of it. He then told me he was selling the restaurants. All of them. "I want you taken care of, Jess," he said. "The money from the sale, it's all going to you." 7 months after that conversation, I sat by Dad's hospital bed, holding his hand as he took his last breath. Just like that, he was gone. The grief was overwhelming. But true to his word, Dad had left everything in order. The money from the restaurant sales came through, a sum so large it made my head spin. After the fog of mourning started to lift, I knew I had to do something with it. So, I did what Dad taught me. I invested. Bought 2 more apartments to add to my growing portfolio. It felt right, somehow. Like I was building on the foundation Dad had laid for me. Life went on. I threw myself back into work, managing my properties on the side. The busy schedule helped keep the loneliness at bay. Then, about a year after Dad passed, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello," I answered, distracted by a report I was working on. Jessica, the voice on the other end, was hesitant, familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. It's your mother." I nearly dropped the phone. "Mom? After all these years?" "I'm back in the city," she continued, rushing to fill the silence. "I was hoping, well, I'd like to see you. To talk." My mind was reeling. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell her to go to hell. But another part, the part that still remembered the little girl waiting for her mom to come home, was curious. "Why now?" I managed to ask, my voice sharper than I intended. She sighed. "It's complicated, Jessica. But I'd like to explain. In person, if you'll let me." I should have said no, should have shut this door before it could fully open. But "Fine," I heard myself say. "1 meeting. That's all I'm promising." We set a time and place, a cafe downtown. Neutral ground. As I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Anger, curiosity, a tiny flicker of hope I thought had died years ago. I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. I kept checking my watch, half hoping Mom wouldn't show, but right on time the bell above the door chimed, and there she was. She looked older, obviously. It had been, 20 years? But it was more than that. She looked worn, tired in a way that went beyond physical age, and she wasn't alone. Trailing behind her was a girl, maybe 17 or so, long dark hair, eyes that darted nervously around the cafe. Mom spotted me and made her way over, the girl following close behind. "Jessica," Mom said, her voice wavering slightly. "Thank you for meeting me. This is Lily, your sister." I must have looked as shocked as I felt, because Lily gave me an awkward little wave. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I echoed, still trying to process. I didn't know I had a sister." Mom at least had the decency to look ashamed. "It's a long story, Jessica. Can we sit?" We settled into a booth, an uncomfortable silence settling over us. I ordered a coffee, more for something to do with my hands than any desire to drink it. "So," I said finally, "you wanted to talk." "Talk?" Mom took a deep breath. After I left, things didn't go as planned. Robert, the man I left for, he left us. About a year after Lily was born, cleaned out our bank accounts and disappeared. I felt a twinge of sympathy, quickly squashed by years of resentment. "That must have been hard," I said, my voice neutral. Mom nodded. "We've been struggling ever since. Moving from place to place, trying to make ends meet. But now..." She trailed off, looking at me with pleading eyes. "I heard you're doing well for yourself. That you have an apartment you rent out." I tensed. How did she know that? "I do okay," I said cautiously. "The thing is," Mom continued, her voice taking on a wheedling tone I remembered all too well from childhood, "we're kind of between places right now." And I thought, well, maybe. And there it was. The real reason for this little family reunion. "You want to live in my apartment," I said flatly. Mom nodded eagerly. "Just until we get on our feet. We don't have much, but we can pay utilities. Please, Jessica, we have nowhere else to go." I looked at Lily. She was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. This girl, my sister I never knew I had, caught in the middle of Mom's schemes. I thought about Dad. What would he do in this situation? He always said everyone deserves a second chance, but he also taught me to protect myself. Okay, I heard myself say, you can stay there for a while, utilities only. Mom's face lit up. Oh, Jessica, thank you. You won't regret this, I promise. As I watched them leave the cafe, Lily throwing a grateful smile over her shoulder, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd just made a huge mistake. The months after Mom and Lily moved into my apartment were surprisingly okay. I didn't charge them rent, just utilities, which barely made a dent in my income from the other properties. Mom got back into real estate, and Lily focused on finishing her senior year of high school. Every now and then, Mom would call or text, always with a "Thank you so much, Jessica. We really appreciate what you're doing for us." It seemed sincere, and I started to think maybe, just maybe, this could work out. Lily graduated high school in June. I even went to the ceremony, watching from the back as my half-sister I barely knew walked across the stage. It was weird, but kind of nice too. Then, about a week after the graduation, everything went to hell. I was at home, enjoying a rare day off, when there was a pounding on my door. I opened it to find Mom, her face red with anger. You lied to me, she screeched, pushing past me into the apartment. What? Mom, what are you talking about? I asked, completely blindsided. She whirled on me. You have 4 apartments. 4. You're making a fortune, and you didn't tell me. I felt my blood run cold. How did she find out? That's none of your business, I stammered. None of my business, she laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I'm your mother. Half of what you have should be mine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you kidding me? You abandoned us. You have no right to anything of mine. I gave birth to you, she shouted. That makes me entitled to nothing. I cut her off. You were legally stripped of your parental rights, remember? You have no claim here. For a moment she looked like she might explode. Then, suddenly, her demeanor changed. Her face crumpled and she started to cry. Jessica, please, she sobbed. Lily, she needs to go to college. We can't afford it. If you just sold one of your apartments. I stared at her, dumbfounded. You want me to sell my property to pay for Lily's college? She nodded eagerly, tears still streaming down her face. You have so much, and we have so little. It's the right thing to do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I'm already letting you live rent-free in one of my apartments. I can't just sell off my investments for a sister I barely know. Her face hardened at that. So that's how it is? You won't help your own family? I am helping, I said, my patience wearing thin. But there's a limit, Mom. I'm not selling anything. She glared at me, all trace of tears gone. You're just like your father, selfish to the core. That was it. The last straw. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my apartment right now. For a moment I thought she might argue, but then she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sank onto my couch, my head in my hands. What had I just done? Was I being selfish? Should I have offered to help with Lily's college? But then I remembered Dad's voice. You worked hard for what you have, Jess. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. I took a deep breath. I'd done nothing wrong. I'd offered them a place to live, rent-free. That was more than generous. The next couple of weeks were a nightmare. It started with whispers. I'd be at the grocery store, and I'd overhear snippets of conversation. Can you believe she's charging her own mother so much rent? I heard she's trying to put them out on the street. At first I tried to ignore it, but then came the Facebook post. Mom, in all her dramatic glory, had written a long, tear-jerking status about how her daughter Me was swimming in money from 4 rental properties, but refusing to help her poor sister go to college. The comments started rolling in immediately. Friends, distant relatives, even some of my coworkers. How could you be so selfish, Jessica? Family should come first. I can't believe you'd treat your own mother and sister like this. It was like I'd stepped into some twisted parallel universe. Had everyone forgotten that this was the same woman who'd abandoned me as a teenager? Who'd called me dead weight in her goodbye note? I was still reeling from the online onslaught when I got the notification overdue utilities on Mom's apartment. My apartment, actually. The one I was letting them live in for free. I called Mom, my hands shaking with anger. "What's going on with the utility bills?" I demanded. "Oh, those," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I figured since you're so rich with all your apartments, you could cover those too. It's the least you could do for family." I saw red. This was too much. Way too much. The next day, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, explaining the whole sordid situation. He listened patiently, then nodded. "You're well within your rights to evict them," he said. "They have no lease, and you've been more than generous already." I left his office with eviction papers in hand, a mix of relief and dread swirling in my stomach. This was it. The nuclear option. When I got to the apartment, Mom answered the door with a scowl. "Oh, it's you," she said. "Come to tell us when you're selling this place to pay for Lily's college? She's got her heart set on this really good school. Expensive, but she deserves the best, don't you think?" I stared at her, momentarily struck dumb by her sheer audacity. Then, wordlessly, I held out the eviction notice. Mom's eyes widened as she scanned the document. "What is this?" she sputtered. "It's an eviction notice," I said, finding my voice at last. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you don't, I'll be forced to take legal action." "You can't do this," Mom shrieked. "We're family. Where are we supposed to go?" I felt a twinge of guilt, thinking about Lily. But then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the unpaid bills. "That's not my problem anymore," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You have 30 days. She went from 0 to nuclear in about 3 seconds flat after these words. "You ungrateful little bitch," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "After everything I've done for you." I tried to stay calm, to explain, but she wasn't having it. She was in full meltdown mode, hurling insults and accusations like grenades. And then, suddenly, she lunged at me. I barely dodged her swinging arm, stumbling backwards. "Mom, stop," I yelled, but she was beyond reason. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. This had gone way too far. The police arrived in what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. I explained the situation as best I could, showing them the eviction notice in my property documents. Mom, of course, had her own version of events. "She's trying to throw us out on the street," she wailed to the officers. Her own mother and sister. The cops exchanged glances. One of them said to me, "This seems like a civil matter. We'd suggest either working it out between yourselves or taking it to court." Mom's face lit up at that. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She thought she'd won, that I wouldn't have the guts to actually sue her. She was wrong. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and preparations. My lawyer was a godsend, helping me gather all the necessary documents and evidence. And then, finally, we were in court. Mom played her part to perfection, crying and carrying on about how cruel and ungrateful I was. My own daughter, she sobbed to the judge, throwing her family out onto the street. I sat there, my stomach in knots, wondering if I was doing the right thing. But then my lawyer stood up, and everything changed. He laid it all out: the abandonment when I was a kid, the termination of Mom's parental rights, the free housing I'd provided. And then he dropped the bombshell. "Your Honor," he said, "Mrs. Thompson isn't the destitute mother she's pretending to be. She owns an apartment in another city, left to her by a former partner. An apartment she's been renting out for profit while living rent-free in my client's property." The courtroom went silent. I looked at Mom, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. The judge turned to her. "Is this true, Mrs. Thompson?" Mom's silence was all the answer he needed. The judge's verdict was swift and decisive. Not only did he grant the eviction, but he also ordered Mom to pay back rent for all the months she'd lived in my apartment. "This court does not look kindly on such blatant manipulation and dishonesty," he said, fixing Mom with a stern glare. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Mrs. Thompson." And just like that, it was over. Mom and Lily moved out the next day. I changed the locks and tried to put the whole mess behind me. A few weeks later, I got a text from Lily. She'd enrolled in a local community college, her dad stepping up to help with tuition. And then, something I wasn't expecting. "I'm sorry about everything, Jessica. Mom was wrong to treat you like that. I hope maybe someday we can get to know each other better." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I'd like that, Lily. And don't worry, I don't hold any of this against you." As I put my phone down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The whole ordeal had been a nightmare, but maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of it. I thought about Dad, about what he'd say if he were here. Probably something wise about forgiveness and moving forward. But also something about standing up for yourself, about not letting anyone, family or not, take advantage of you.